That's what I was thinking. All right.
Okay. All right.
All right, let's mount this sucker up.
Anybody rejoin?
Not yet. All right. Nobody's on just yet. We got two people back on.
All right. Sorry about that. We've got it sorted now. So I'm just going to start again from the beginning. Today I'm going to be fitting this door, hanging it on hinges and then fitting it. And I've already done some of the things involved in fitting a door before this morning, but only because they had to be done. So if we look at the cabinet, the hinges are already there. When I do butt hinges, I use what's called a hinge strip. And so I make the cabinet, glue it up, assemble it, all that. And then the hinge strip is a separate piece of wood. I mortise it for the hinges, and then I glue it into the cabinet. And I've done that. And I had to do that because in order to hang and fit the cabinet door, the hinges have to already be mortised into the cabinet. So we wouldn't want to stand here around watch as the glue dries. So I've already done that. The door is a framing panel door, so it has two vertical stiles. This one has three rails in it, bottom, middle, and top. It's mortise and tenon joinery, and it's going to fit into the cabinet. Now, when I first take the door and I cut off the horns, I make sure that the door fits into the cabinet perfectly, into the opening. It's a little bit wide right now because of the hinges, but that's all right. And what I mean by fit into the cabinet perfectly, the hinge style is left straight, and it becomes a reference for everything else. So this should be straight, and you should do your surface prep on it. Then the top of the door should be parallel to the top of the cabinet, that top of the opening. Same with the bottom and the pull style. And it should fit in there so there's really no gap. All right, and at this stage, if you do that, if you have these three parallel to the inside of the cabinet, then when it comes time to put the gap on, it's a lot easier. And one thing to note is that if your cabinet is square, then that's really easy to get, this parallel to, the top edge of the door parallel to the cabinet. You can just cut it square. But if it's not square, what you want to do is take a bevel gauge, and you would be coming off the hinge side. You set the bevel gauge, and then whatever this angle is, you can mark it on the top of your door and then cut to that line, and that gives you the top edge of the door parallel to the cabinet. All right, and then you can do that for the bottom, and you can also do it for the pull side. And that's how you get it parallel all the way around if it's not square. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, and this will take up the bulk of the live stream this morning, is cutting the mortises, hanging it, and then getting these gaps dialed in all the way around. To cut the mortises, I use a router and a template. And in my router is a really small flush trim bit. It's got a 1/2 inch cutting length, and there's a bearing there. So that bearing rides in the template, and cuts a mortise that's the exact right depth, the exact right size. And that's a really quick and accurate way to make a mortise. And so that's the overall what the technique is. Now, specifically, this template that I've made has 2 different notches in it. And that's for the 2 different hinges. And the reason that I make my templates this way is so that it ensures that the spacing between the hinges in the cabinet and the spacing between the hinges on the door are identical. And that's probably like the biggest challenge one of the biggest challenges of hanging a door is ensuring that these mortises all end up in the right location so that when you hang the door, you can actually hang the door. So what I do is referencing off the door itself, I mark where the mortises are going to be on the template material, and then I cut notches. Pass me one of those hinges there. I cut notches at the table saw, and the length of this notch matches the length of the hinge. It does really, I promise. And then the depth of it is so that it goes to halfway into the barrel. Like this. All right, so that's going to, this then becomes like an exact template for the hinge. You route it, you end up with a mortise that's exactly the right size and all of that. Now, the template itself, the way that I make it, it has 2 pieces. There's the top and then a fence. To simplify it, both of these pieces are exactly the same length as the opening. So in other words, they're exactly the same length as this hinge strip. And what that allows me to do, both with the hinge strip and the door, is the same length right now too. So when it comes time to put the template on the door or on the hinge strip, there's really no figuring out where it goes. Each end of it should be flush with the end of the hinge strip or the door. So it sort of automatically locates it, which makes things easier. And you can, well, it actually gets like this on the edge of the door. So it's going to allow me to route in and cut that mortise. And I just realized, fuck, I put the fence on backwards. So I'm going to have to pop it off and nail it back on, but that'll only take a second. So you
Yep.
plug that in and then get the, if you look behind you, there's my little pin nailer down there in the case. So that's a good lesson. You got to really pay attention to what you're doing. I will say that when I made the hinge strip, I used the template like this without the fence on it, and I just flushed it up with my fingers and then clamped it all down to the bench and routed. So I'll get the fence on in the right location, which has got to go like that. It's all fine. It's fine. Yeah, and then see on the infeed table for my planer, there's this blue, the crescent wrench infeed table. It's a good thing Joe's here this morning to get stuff for me. But this is a good lesson that everyone makes mistakes, especially when it's late at night or early in the morning. All right.
There's not much in anything else.
Are you sure? There's nothing. Now the notches on both the fence and the template are the same size. You can make the notches on the fence larger, since they don't really come into play. It's just for clearance. Alright, so we're back in business. So this will go on the door like that, and then I'll route in. So that's the next thing to do, is let's route those mortises. Move the cabinet out of the way. The door goes into here, into the vise, and it does fit down in between the screws, thankfully. Make sure I'm on the hinge side. Alright, it's the front of the door, the hinges go here, so I'm routing that side. And then the hinge goes in the door like this. So the template's got to go like that. Now, in terms of locating your hinges on a frame and panel door, the hinge, for the top hinge, the top edge of the mortise needs to be just below the top rail, and on the bottom one, the bottom of the mortise should be just above the top of the bottom rail. All right, so those, let's see. Okay, those are flush. Little clamp. Another clamp at the top. All right, so one of the benefits of doing a hinge mortise this way is that you can use the router to ensure that the depth of the mortise is exactly perfect. And the easiest way to do that is to use a plunge router, a little plunge router if you can, because they're easier to move about. I've got the bit in there. I'm going to loosen up the stop plunger, and I'm going to lower the bit down through the template until it comes into contact with the door. Alright. And so now it's touching the door, and I've locked it. Take the plunger, lift it up, put one leaf under it, and lock it. Now the router will plunge the exact depth that it needs to be. You didn't have to measure anything, you didn't have to eyeball it, you just use the hinge as a reference. So I'm going to double check. I feel like it moves a little bit when I tighten it down. Actually not sitting on the door, that would have been disastrous.
Semi-disastrous.
Yeah. Alright. It's definitely worth the effort to make a template like this every time you make a door, because it just makes the whole process a lot easier. Alright, I'm going to double check the setup, because that only takes a second. And if you screw up the mortises, it takes a long time to remake a door. So it's always worth double checking, triple checking. All right, so I'm ready to go now. Normally I would be sitting in a stool to do this.
You want the stool?
Can you pass me that? This way, I can see what the bit's doing, even though it is a flush trim bit, and it really doesn't need me to see what it's doing. But I'm going to watch anyways. All right, so I'm going to route these out real quick. So that part is done. Now all I need to do is square up the corners where the bit, because of it's round, can't get into the corners all the way. So using the template as a chisel guide or a paring guide, just clean out those corners. There's an odd thing about flush trim bits. I don't know if I've ever had a flush trim bit that actually cut things flush. They seem to always cut just a fraction of a millimeter inside the template for some reason. And so you can also run the chisel down even where the bit did clean it all the way to the template, just to make sure that that mortise is the right size before you take the template off. Alright, there's one. Is anybody asking questions?
Not yet.
Is anybody even watching?
Yeah. 15 people are watching.
15 people. That's more than people than are watching Philip Morley drink his coffee right now.
I don't know. I think more people are watching, Philip.
That's probably true.
Trip says, yep. I don't. I think because you're watching. Oh, 18 people. They must have heard you.
All right. So those are both done. And take the test drive here. It's a little tight there. Oh, that's right. That one was a little tight. There's a black automatic pencil in that. So that one is a little too tight. So I'm just going to mark a line. And also it looks like it didn't come out. Maybe when I was paring it, I did that. There we go. It was just I didn't do a good job paring. And just like that. All right, so that's a nice tight fit. It's flush. It's all good. This foot, there's something.
Nate wants to know, how did you choose to pair further at the bottom of the hinge mortise instead of the top?
That's actually the top of the hinge mortise.
Because the doors.
Yeah, because that's the top, and I should not have done that. I should have done it at the bottom, but it was only. It's not. I didn't really adjust the size of the mortise. All I did was do a better job pairing. That I should have done when the template was on there.
Got it.
So, all right, and let's check this one. That one's good. All right. Before I take it out of the vise, I'm going to drill holes for the screws. And to do that, you want to use Vicks bit, because that will automatically center the hole in the, whatever the hole in the hinge is called. I have no idea. Something else I think is important that will make your life easier when you're fitting hardware like hinges is if you start with good hinges. If you buy crappy hinges, you're gonna feel more frustration. So, and also if you're spending a lot of time and effort and money to make something for your home or for a client, especially if it's for a client, but for your home, why cheap out on the hinges, or on the hardware? You might as well put money there and complete the whole thing and have it be really nice. Whenever possible, I always use hinges from Horton Brasses, which is in Connecticut. And you can buy them online because they are rock solid and phenomenal. All right. So I've got that drilled for the screws.
Really quick, Blue Tuna Tiger wants to know, are you shooting to get the width halfway to the barrel?
Yes.
Because I think a few of these people missed the beginning.
Yeah. So the barrel should stick out about halfway, or the edge of the door. Maybe we can just show this. So you want the barrel to be buried about halfway into the mortise.
Is that so you don't get wonkiness when you go to close it, like whether adjustment and that's where the hinge point is? Is that what you're aiming for?
It's because that means that the front edge of the door is in a sense on the center of the rotation.
Yep.
If you put it out, then the door is gonna open a little bit differently. And if you put it deeper in, that's also going to affect like how far the door opens and things like that. So, all right. What we need to do is bring the cabinet back. And put it on the hinges. So here's my little thing of screws. And let's hope I didn't screw anything up. See that little black handled Yankee screwdriver? About watching me screw. Alright, come on, why is it not?
Here you go. That sounded good.
Mm-hmm.
Did you choose to use 2x lumber as a challenge, or did you just see 2x lumber that you liked?
Well, I started buying it to experiment with ingrain veneers, and then I realized that I had some. I mean, some of the stuff that I bought, I really liked the grain of it. I realized I had really tight, straight grain. So I thought, well, I should go back and look for more, because in my next book, which is about how I make boxes, not about designing them, but how I make them, I decided there's a little set of boxes I'm going to make for my kitchen. They're going to be in the book, and I really wanted that to use a softwood and with really nice straight grain. And I thought the hemlock would look nice, so I went and bought more. And then I wanted to work with it some before I actually made the boxes for the book. So I have this cabinet, which is for someone that lives in Idaho or Wyoming. Now I can't remember, but and it's getting shipped. And so I was like, hey, do you mind? This is what I'm going to use. It's going to look really nice, and it's going to be light, which will make shipping it less expensive. So that's why I chose to use it on this cabinet. But I also wanted to use it because I wanted to show that you can make that the beauty of something is not inherently tied to the wood that you choose. There was in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s in furniture making, there was an over reliance on lumber to make quote unquote attractive furniture. So if you was like, well, I'm just going to make this out of tiger maple, and therefore it's going to be pretty, and there was no real, a lot of times there wasn't a focus on actual good design. So one of the things that I'm always interested in is like not necessarily not using really fancy woods. I never really use exotic woods, and instead focusing on the design itself and choosing quiet woods that complement the design. So that's a long answer to a short question. All right.
So Nate Wong Hefter wants to know, how would you prep for installing very small screws on the small hinges? He's like, I just broke a screw in spite of some pre-drilling, when screwing in some small Brusso box hinges. I guess it depends on what kind of wood you're going with. A lot of the companies go with the steel screws beforehand so that you can
Yeah, if you can get a steel screw the same size, that's the best thing to do. If you can't, and it's a hardwood, you want to make sure that you're drilling a pilot hole that is the correct size, and the diameter that you use for softwood is less than the diameter you use for a hardwood. And you can probably find a guide for that online.
Someone said beeswax.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is use wax. So wax the screw before you put it in for the first time. All right, so I really should put another screw in each one. You have to be careful with the hinges when you're fitting, because you might think one screw is enough, and then you fit the door, and then when you put the rest of the screws in, it actually changes the way that the hinge sits in the mortise, and then it changes the way your door fits. But 2 in this hinge should be enough. If nothing else this morning, at least you got to see the world's coolest Yankee screwdriver in operation. I love this thing. All it is a flat tip. That's the only, you can't take that out. But it's perfect for stuff like this.
Matt Butler says, "Where do you source your lumber? I live in the same region as you do, and I'm new to the area." Matt and I have gone to Conway, and Matt has praised Conway lumber.
I can't be
And
telling people where I get my good
oh
lumber.
shit, but that's not where we got this.
No, I generally go to a place called Conway in Gaylordsville, or a place called Hinman's Lumber
Yep.
in Burlington, Connecticut. But all of this came from the Home Depot in Waterbury. Everything except for the little bit of cherry. Everything, but all of it came from the Home Depot in Waterbury. All right, so the door is now too big because of the gap that the hinge makes. These hinges actually have a pretty big gap in them, which is kind of disappointing to me. Which is why you get Horton brasses, because Horton brasses are nice. The leaves on these are not very thick, which is why the gap is bigger. All right, so that means that I'm going to need to trim it down in terms of its width, and that's all going to come off the pull style. And then when I get it to close like that, I'll worry about the top and the bottom.
Can you turn it this way a little bit?
Oh, yeah, turn
There
it
you
this
go.
way. So I'm going to do this first, just so I can get it to close into the cabinet, and that'll allow me to see the gaps at the top and the bottom better. Now, ideally, you have even gaps all the way around. So you would want to know how big this gap is. And it is just under 3/32 probably when it closes. So I think this is kind of a big gap. I probably will not do a gap that big around all the way around, because then the door, I don't think it'll. I don't want to do that. So what I need to do is take the door off and then shorten it up some. And it doesn't need to be much, but the one thing you want to do when this door swings closed, at this point, in a sense, it's wider than it is when it's closed, and that's because the back corner of the pull style is going out at an angle. If you trim this up to the point where the back edge clears the cabinet, and this edge is square to the face, when you close it, the gap is going to be really big. So this is what you do. Instead of keeping this edge square, you back bevel it about 3 degrees. And then the back edge will clear, and there'll still be a small gap up front. And you can do that a couple of different ways. One, you can just tilt your hand plane some and plane it. You could tilt the table saw blade some and plane and cut it that way. Or the other thing to do, if you have a shooting board that's long enough, you can put this down and then put something underneath it, something about 1/8 of an inch thick, and that'll hold it up at an angle, and then you hand plane it. But I think what I will do is just hand plane it freehand. Is there any questions?
Yeah, Bob Clark says, "Do you ever have a problem with the VIX bit drilling the hole off center, which then pulls the hinge out of alignment?" And he says, I have had that issue. Is that a thing? Is that quality of VIX bit?
I've not experienced that, but it could be that if there's any slop in the fit of the hinge and the mortise, that could happen. And it really wouldn't be the VIX bit's fault. What would be happening is that when you push it into the wood, it'll follow the path of least resistance, and so it might twist off where you want it to be, because those aren't brad point bits in there. It's a twist bit, and twist bits, as you know, wander. So you want to make sure that the hinge fits really tightly into the mortise, and then the hinge won't move when you're drilling. But it could just be you have a crappy hinge bit, a VIX bit rather. All right.
How long did it take you to make the jig for the mortises?
Oh, maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. They're pretty easy to make. The one thing that, the hardest part about it is ensuring that those notches are exactly the right size. That's the tough part. I'm looking at this style. No, it's square. One thing I've learned about this hemlock is that it's very prone to compressing. So like when you clamp up the door, if you put too much pressure on it, it'll actually compress the wood to the point where it gets fatter here than it is up here. And so you have to be really careful with that. All right. So I am going to pop this into the vise. Let me move this out of the way. You grab my number 5. It's all the way down. Yeah, that's it. And I'm just going to start with the plane a little bit angled so that I'm taking more off the back than I am the front. Or only taking it off the back to begin with. Get an eyeball on that. Go a little bit deeper.
Caleb, George wants to know what your plan for finish is on the box.
I'll use shellac, clear shellac. Skew the blade a little bit. Okay, it's starting to. Can they see that? You see it's starting to bevel a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry for the shakiness. I'm hand holding. Next time I'll bring a gimbal or something.
All right. That's pretty good. I am sort of going off memory right now, knowing that at the bottom it was wider than at the top. So I'm taking more off the bottom. Ideally, I get it to the point where it just closes, and then I can adjust the gap with more accuracy, with more precision. So it's time to put the door back
You can
on.
you can leave it there. I'll just move it.
Okay. There's a screwdriver. I say it all the time, but one of the most important skills in furniture making is patience. Because this is a slow process of hanging the door, testing it, taking it off, hanging it again. Especially, with these little tiny brass screws, you can't do this with a drill or an impact wrench, So you got to do it by hand. Let's see. Ta-da! All right, so that closes now. And the gap down here is fine. Can you see that?
Let's see.
But what I want is to have that gap be consistent all the way up. So you can see it's kind of tight here. In fact, there is no gap. So what I'm going to do, this is one of the few times you'll see me actually measure something.
Caleb says, very cool. I would have definitely trimmed it square and made a huge gap.
Yes. You would have, Caleb. That's what I know about you, Caleb. Is you would have done that. All right, so let's measure this gap. It is, oh, it's going to have to go, I might have to get out the old millimeter metric one to make it a little bit easier.
How dare you, says Caleb. Well, how dare you square up a door, Caleb?
It's about a 32nd of an inch. I'm sorry. 32nd of an inch. So what I'm going to do is mark in, oh, I can't mark in that way. A 32nd of an inch.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to take the door off. Now the back of the cabinet's gone. That's actually not the back of the cabinet, it's just the back of that particular little cubby.
Just an insert.
Yeah, it's an insert.
When precision matters, there's millimeters.
No, I think you got that. It's when pretension matters,
When pretension matters.
there's the metric system.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't tell you how many times people turn.
Bob Clark says feeler gauge. No question mark. I added the question mark to that.
I own a set of feeler gauges. I don't use them for anything. All right, so I have that marked. Let me grab some type of straight edge. My 2-foot Starrett, which I bought secondhand.
Really?
Yep. At Brass City Record and Tools. One of the coolest stores ever.
No longer here?
No longer here because unfortunately the guy that owned it and ran it passed away. Walt was his name. And he would have secondhand, or like, he would have blemished, he would have Starrett stuff that didn't pass muster. So Starrett would drill these tiny little hole into it, not a hole all the way through, but like, and then they would sell them secondhand. This guy would sell it secondhand.
Jeez.
So I would, I could get like a 6-inch Starrett roll that had nothing wrong with it except like a blemish in the printing for like.
Oh, it wasn't even out of square?
No.
Oh.
And it would be like $5.
Oh. Amazing.
Because Starrett is in Athol, Mass.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Which is somewhere in Massachusetts. All right. So what I did was drew a straight line from my point up here to down at the bottom where it's not on the line anymore, because that doesn't need to be adjusted. So now I'm just going to hand plane down to that pencil line, and that gap should be perfect. All right. So let me clamp this in. I'm not going to use my number 5 anymore. Actually, just give me my little H&T Gordon.
That's heavier than I thought.
Yeah. So I'm just going to now hand plane down to that line, maintaining the same angle. But it already cleared back here, so I probably don't need to adjust the back anymore. I'm just going to level out. I'm going to make it a little less steep on the bevel, and just by cleaning up the front edge and bringing that down, which that might be really the only thing that is, I might have just tilted it more here, and which is why more was taken off the back than the front. If you follow. And see, I'm already down to the line.
Just with those two passes?
Yeah. Not quite. A little bit more. All right. Let's give it all. Two goes. All right, let's see how that looks.
When the door was first made, did it fit in the opening, and now with the hinges added, you need to refit?
That's correct. It was just, I had it set when I took it out of the clamps, the door with the hinges in there was just a tiny bit too wide. Ideally,
So it fit with the hinge strip minus the hinges, or was...
yeah, if the hinges had not been in the cabinet, it would have fit in there, and it actually you would have thought it was too small.
Okay. Hope that helps, Caleb.
Because, I mean, I know that there's going to be a gap, right, created by the hinges. So I know that I can actually make the door a little bit narrow, and that's okay. And when I say a little bit, I mean like a 32nd of an inch or something like that. So I did not take enough off. People hear the birds.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking the same thing.
All right. Actually, will you pass me my in the plane area, left-hand block plane? Yeah. Let's go with that. It's just set for heavier cut. So.
Where are people watching from? That's what I want to know. See if people answer. North Attleboro, Mass.
That's also somewhere in Massachusetts.
It is, I believe so. Chicago, Illinois, Northwood, New Hampshire, San Jose, Dang, Bob, you're up early. Birmingham, Alabama, Tampa,
Birmingham.
Iowa, Seattle, British Columbia, Canada. Nice.
Birmingham.
Concord, New Hampshire, St. Louis, Illinois side, Amherst, Ohio.
My younger sister went to college in Birmingham at Sanford.
New Milford, New Jersey. It's a pretty good spread.
All right, let's give that a go. All right, it's still a little wider down here than it is up here. But as my buddy Kelly likes to say, sometimes the solution is worse than the problem. Um, so I'm going to leave that the way it is right now, knowing that, I'm going to sand that edge, hand sand it, so that'll open it up a little bit more. But I'm going to leave it. That's a nice little gap right there. And it is also extremely humid. It's summer still in Connecticut, although once September hits, it's no longer summer. So I know it's also just going to, if anything, it's going to shrink a little bit, and so the gap will open up even more. So I'm going to leave that the way it is now.
Yeah, it's humid today.
It's really humid, yeah. And I'm going to work on my top and bottom gaps. Now, ideally, at this stage, both the top and the bottom would fit like this. So I'm going to talk about the bottom. The top actually has a little bit of a gap already, and over here, so that's going to be more like fitting this. But if you have it so that they are perfectly parallel and flush sort of to that opening, then what I'm going to do, because I want the gap to be about the same, which is about a 32nd of an inch, I'm going to set a sliding ruler thingamajig to a 32nd of an inch.
So a little bit more of a gap over on the left. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a shadow though from the lights in here.
Yeah.
Just so people get a good look.
Yeah. All right. So it's important that this bottom edge of the door is parallel to the cabinet, and it's also it's touching the cabinet. So that means that in order to open up this gap of 32nd of an inch, all I really have to do is mark a line on it that's parallel to the edge and a 32nd of an inch. And that's really easy to do with, you could use a combination square, and I'll show you how I do it. I find it's hard to keep a pencil on the end of a combination square as I'm sliding it. So I use a different tool.
Caleb's getting real pushy. He says, I know you just announced it the other day, but how is the cabinet online class prep going? I'm just messing with you, Caleb.
Yeah, we're
talking about it?
Yeah, Joe and I are figuring it out. Joe's going to help me with that.
This is a practice run.
So we got to figure some things out first. So I'm using my Veritas thingamajig. I don't remember what they call this, a cabinet maker square or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And I'm just going to mark a line.
I just got one. It's really nice.
What did I hit? So now I have a pencil line that you could, in theory, go to if this is a square cut, you could go to the table saw and just cut that if you're feeling adventurous. But I think I'll just do it the old-fashioned way.
Yes, Trip, a marking gauge is okay. Matt just says it's hard to slide the pencil with a not a marking gauge, sorry.
A marking gauge I would not do, because if you're not really careful with that line that you're cutting, if you work down to that line, you might have gone too far, to that cut line. So you would want to, I mean, in theory it works, yeah, as long as you make sure that the knife is oriented the correct way. So, and it should be that the bevel is facing the fence of the marking gauge, and the flat of the knife or the flat of the wheel is facing away. And if you do that, and you get that flat exactly where it needs to be, then yeah, you could use that. It would just, I think that would be really hard to keep a 32nd of an inch and do that. All right. let's get crazy.
And you're gonna do this with the hand plane?
Yeah, I'm gonna do this with a hand plane. I like to use this one because I can push and pull it. Let me see if I can get it just slightly deeper. That's just I should have sharpened the tool this morning.
Let's see. Colin wants to know what was the name of the tool used. Colin, this is Veritas sliding square. I just looked it up. It's on Veritas site. It's about $40, and I believe they're still doing free shipping over like $40 on Lee Valley.
That's why I don't.
So check that out. Trip wants to know. Oh, Trip's asking for a friend. What kind of plane? That's an HNT Gordon smoothing plane?
It's called, yeah, it says Palm Smoothers
It's palm smoothing.
by H&T Gordon.
Don't worry, Trip. What happens on these feeds stays on these feeds, so we won't tell anybody. Yeah, and Jacob just said Veritas sliding square. Last time we mentioned them, whether it was on our podcast or not, they sold out. So remember when we mentioned the sliding square and then the Lee Valley. This one also sold out. We don't know if it was because of us, but we mentioned it and it just happened to be that they sold out right after. So.
Normally I can plane against the grain with this little guy and it doesn't tear out, but that's softwoods for you. All right, that's pretty good. Let's check that out.
The feed's good for everybody, just checking. Super.
Yeah, it needs a little bit of work down here. But just right there, and I would leave that for now and leave it until I was doing my surface prep for everything. And it just needs a little bit off right there. But I'm going to put these other two screws in. Someone being a wiseacre?
No, Jeff. I asked how it looked, and Jeff P said influencer status. Matt loves that term. Anybody got any other questions for us?
Here's a question for me.
All right.
Why do I never put some type of catch or stop on the fucking doors? I never do that. And I really should. Alright, so that closes. It's got a good gap you know, again, the gap over here, that's really horsey. And I would not put that gap all the way around. But also, man, I really hope the person I'm making this for
Isn't
doesn't see
watching.
this. Yeah, these are like sort of mid-grade hinges, but they were the only ones I could find that were the right size. I wish Horton would make hinges this size. So that's a nice, it's closing out, it's a nice fit, and I would leave that for now. And then when it came time to do my surface prep, I would just make minor adjustments to it. But let's do this. And you get to see if I can open the door. Oh yeah, I pushed it out. It's gonna,
Bill says you don't put latches on because your door fit is perfect every time.
it can still swing open. So that's how you fit a door. I don't know if that was informative or not, but that's how I fit a door. Just to run through it again really quickly. When you first take the door out of the hinges and you cut the horns off, you want it to fit in that opening perfectly, just like you would a drawer front, so that there's no gaps around it and it's snug and everything, all four sides of the door are parallel to the four sides of the case. Then you mortise for the hinges, however you want to. I showed you the way that I do it. You also saw how fast it was. Then you do not ever do anything to the hinge style. That stays straight. And you make adjustments to the top and bottom of the door and then to the pull side of the door, and that's it. And you want the gaps around these three to be the same. And if the hinge over here, if that gap were smaller, I would make them all the same size. But that one's just too large. So, but it doesn't, it looks fine. It just, if that were all around the door, it would look a little strange. So that's it. How to hang a door. Are there any more questions before we wrap things up this morning?
Caleb wants to know, what are the plans for the back? Solid plywood panel?
No, this needs to be, this is going to hang on a French cleat. So actually the back is going to be made from plywood. Let me turn this around and show you. So there's going to be a strip of plywood up here that gets glued in, and it's going to have that 45 degrees on it. Then there will be just a normal piece of strip of plywood down here that gets glued in. And then there'll be a big sort of like plate with the 45 degree on it that gets screwed to the wall, and then you put the cabinet up on that. So it won't be a complete back, there'll be a gap there because you need a gap in order to get it onto the cleat. But it'll cover up most of it. But that's how I'm doing the back on this cabinet.
And Chris Dixon says, what are you going to do for the rest of your Saturday? We're going to record a podcast, hopefully.
Yeah, we can do a podcast.
What else? What else you got, Matt?
Actually, so next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, a person's coming to my shop for private instruction. So I have to do some prep work for that because tomorrow I'm going used record shopping. And I'm also I'm making a special trip to Massachusetts tomorrow with a buddy to purchase something.
Nice.
Which is legal in Massachusetts. Anyways, so if there are any other questions, if you have ideas about other things you'd like me to show, I'll consider it. Usually I like to try to fit these into the stuff that I'm working on. And I was at the point of fitting the door, and I thought it'd be interesting to show how to do that. This cabinet is pretty much done now. I need to make the pulls and finish off the back, but then it's going to be done, and I'll do the surface prep and all that. So I'll think about what else I could do as a live feed. Check out the other videos on my channel. Subscribe if you're not subscribed.
Keep a lookout for some classes we'll be posting hopefully soon.
Yeah, if you're not following me on Instagram, which I imagine you are, but if you're not, follow me. It's at MEK Woodworks. That's where I make all the announcements for classes that I'm teaching, doing stuff like this. That's that, I guess.
People keep either commenting about this or saying how cool it is.
Yeah, so that is a actual Yankee screwdriver, the company Yankee screwdriver, which is I don't know where those were made. I think they were made in New England, but I'm not positive. It's the Yankee number 2H Handyman. And I got this, I was on a photo shoot for Fine Woodworking Magazine, and the author dropped the photo prop that I had brought with me, and like he was showing how to hang a door on, with Euro cabinet hinges, and he dropped it, and the cabinet belonged to somebody else, and so he felt bad that he thought I was going to get in trouble, so he gave me this little screwdriver, which I absolutely love. And then I had a buddy filed it down for me and blunted it and made it thicker so that it would fit slotted screws more tightly.
Nice.
So yeah, I love this thing.
Awesome.
All right, that's cool. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you'll have a good weekend and see you next time.
Seacrest out? How do you turn this thing off?